Welcome back to Nourished Inside Out, the space where growth gets real and self love leads the way. I'm your host, Annetta Walklaw, and before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you of something powerful. You are worthy, you are enough, and you don't need to wait for permission to love yourself fully. That's exactly why I wrote my book, Blooming with Self Love, to give you the tools, affirmations, and daily mindset shifts to help you stand in your power and own your story. This book isn't just words on a page, it's a movement. So if you're ready to stop shrinking and start showing up for yourself, grab your copy today with the link in the show notes below, and let's walk this self love journey together. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Nourished Inside Out. Today I'm here with Ronni Landeck. She helps mid career women thrive without burnout by fostering their joy, peace, and harmony in their work and lives and enabling them to lead with clarity and confidence during times of change. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ronni.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor to be able to talk to you and to your audience. Just there's so much we could cover. So I hope, just to bring something that helps people where they are right now.
Yeah, it's your background is so fascinating because you are somebody who has experienced burnout in the corporate world and in your career. And now you've taken that burnout and now you help other women overcome that. So can you walk us through your journey a little bit on what your life was like working in the corporate world and how that led you to burnout?
Yeah. I would say the the most important pieces of the story are that, burnout isn't like, okay, flip a switch. I was good. Now I'm not. You know what I mean? It's more
Mm-hmm.
like a slow progression. At least it is for um, most people, including myself. I was always very determined and very driven in life, just as a young person and being a young parent and just like starting with responsibilities super early in life. I always had this achievement orientation, like, let me get if wherever I am, what's ahead of that? How do I get to next? I always had that mentality. Um, and that's good until it's not. And that's what I found, at some point, fast forward, from being a young parent, paying my way through college and, figuring it out with a lot of determination and what felt like just like sheer willpower in my early 20s to fast forward to, being a mom, having three children, having a career and, being responsible for 20 million in business a year and, having 14 teams that answer to you. It sounds exciting and it was, but it was also a formula for how much is too much, to put on your plate. So it was
Yeah.
sort of a gradual creep, as I might describe it, because you just always add like one more thing. Oh, I can take on one more, responsibility, or even in your personal life, you might say yes to things because you're like, why say no? If I can just do it, then maybe more is actually more, that sort of undercurrent of, um, I will feel like I've done enough when I add this next thing or have this next accomplishment. So I think it was like a slow build with obviously good intentions and good values behind it, but then at some point I just found that I didn't really know who I was very clearly anymore. I knew what I was responsible for and I knew who kind of like counted on me for things, but it was really the danger zone, I think, was like not really knowing who I am at the core because of all that busyness and achievement.
Yeah, something that you said is that at first it's exciting because you get trusted with these responsibilities and it makes you feel good that, oh, that your manager or your boss, they trust you to take on more responsibility. But at the end of the day, after doing that for so long, we forget who we are. I faced that myself as well. I didn't work in the corporate world, but I worked in the salon world. So that was always, can you take another client? Or can
Mhm.
you stay extra? Can you work this wedding on this weekend? And I was always excited to take on those responsibilities. But then eventually I was like, I don't know who I am. All I do is literally do hair. So it's like, what do I do for fun? That's like that was always the hardest question. Like, who is Anetta and who is
Mhm.
Ronni after going through the cycle of just working and working and taking on more responsibility? So
Yeah.
how did you start to find yourself after that? What were some things that you did?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Um, the way I think of it is I had to relearn or remember some things about myself and just about how we live in this world. And I take it back to something as simple as how did we play when we were kids? Tapping
Mm,
into that time when you're curious and you create something and knock it down. And you're like, oh, I learned something about the natural world by doing this, and getting outside and just letting yourself connect again in a really free way to the physical world. Nature is very healing, very restorative. Um, and spending a lot more time intentionally doing things that felt nurturing to my inner world is really the journey that it has taken. Healing things that maybe I just didn't literally allow to be on my radar for decades, literally decades, like things that were important, but I was like, I can't deal with that. I have to get X done, Y done. So and so is counting on me. I'm raising a family. So when my children launched 2 years ago, and they're all adults doing their adult thing. Thank, Thankfully, they're amazing, amazing humans. They also are my teachers. But when that season hit, I was just like, okay, time to really um, get real about what's happening inside me that I haven't taken the time to prioritize. So it was a lot of things like learning how to be creative again. I had little bits of creativity throughout my career working in, fashion and being able to use creativity in teaching people things, or in presenting when I was working with youth, like at church. But it wasn't like full on, just like more of that flow time and really producing something that wasn't there before. Like that feels really good now. And I had to relearn how to be creative, almost, or remember how to be creative. um, and then also learn how to nurture those parts of me on the inside that really um, have been sort of like on standby for some time. Unfortunately or fortunately, it is what it is, right? I am where I am, and I think the value of the things that maybe I have been learning and growing through have value for other people. That's why I'm here, sharing whatever might be of encouragement or nuggets that people can take and say, yes, I can apply that and take that next courageous step forward.
that's so important. What you just said is going back to like what you'd like to do as a child. I think a lot of times when we're growing up, we forget about those little things, but they're not just things for like kids to do. It's honestly going back to yourself, because when you're being run down by different obligations, different tasks, your career, different people around you, it's really how can you go back home to yourself instead of letting the world try to shape you. Like, yeah, let the world shape you into who you can be and
Mhm.
learn, but never forget who you are. So that is so important on what you said there. When when did you start to make this a career for yourself? When did you start coaching people and bringing clients on?
Yeah, thanks for that. I always led from a viewpoint, even through my corporate path, I led from a viewpoint of we all have wisdom that we bring to this situation. We all have life experience, innate talents. So I always led from that coaching perspective of what is the what is the potential in the person around me and the potential solution that can come because of all of us, that richness. And so there was a coaching mindset of how do I show up better and also maximize who's around me. So I led as a coach without knowing it was called that through my years. Like I intuitively led that way. And then I got more formalized about it about 5 years ago and said, okay, I'm going to get the certification in coaching and really start to put the message out that I want to help people one-on-one in their career. Just learn how to have joy in the being and of course the doing that we all are doing. We're all making a life for ourselves in this environment that we face, right? So I've really had a really strong passion to help people have the most joy and the most impact that they were meant to have, and discovering that is the fun, testing things out, acquiring new skills, shifting mindsets, like you said, that bring you back to yourself, self nurturing, self awareness, obviously, is a big chunk of it. And then understanding that there is not really any ultimate, like, yes, I've made it. You know what I mean? It's all part of a process that once you learn to trust that we're in a process and that it all does work out, um, and maybe almost never how we plan or how we would request it to go. But enjoying the journey itself brings all that richness and the ability to be happy in the here and now, and to be there for others in a way that feels very healthy, you know. So I
Yeah.
started the coaching journey, like I said, about 5 years ago, and wasn't sure who it was going to resonate with as far as who I could reach and serve. But it seems like, people are sort of your mirror in some ways. So I feel like other women who are also, maybe high achievers or, high functioning and maybe end up over functioning in their roles, definitely, click with my messaging because I've been there in many ways. And I also believe in, teaching clients to not judge themselves or their situation negatively. It just is. And that way I'm able to be a really perhaps easily available resource in these conversations that are sometimes tough to have, so for the person who's kind of maybe facing something and talking about it with someone else for the first time, really honestly, like I feel like I enjoy creating that co-creating that relationship where they feel safe but also feel creative about solutions. So that's why I love what I do.
That's so beautiful. Did you ever go through like a phase of imposter syndrome while you were building your coaching business and transitioning from the corporate world to coaching?
I would say it's like not necessarily a phase, it's more like a moment to moment thing. And I think that's normal for
Okay.
all of us. Because let's say 10 a.m., we're like, okay, I got this day. Let's go, bring it on. And we look at our calendar and we get our mindset ready. And maybe by noon we're like, who am I to even talk to this audience about these things, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like it's, for me, it's less of a phase but more like a moment to moment, like, hey, wait a minute, what's actually true, and what do I really control? I don't control, the other person's perception or opinion, but I do control how I show up. What is my intention? How well do I listen? Am I really being, a compassionate listener? Am I really being non-judgmental towards myself and others in that exact moment? So I control those things. I can't control the rest of it. So that's how I buffer against the imposter syndrome at this point in my life.
That's such a really great point, though. I've never heard it like that. I always hear people say like yes or no, but you said it in the way of reality. It's moment to moment. It really is. It's like one moment, yeah, I got this task, and the next moment, it's just like, what am I doing? But then you have to like get yourself back together. So I love how you said it was moment to moment. What is like one of the biggest challenges that you came across on your journey?
Yeah. Um, I think that's a good question. I haven't thought about it till you asked me that, but I would say redefining how I want to show up,
Okay.
sort of like claiming an identity that is evolving, I think is probably a challenge and takes a lot of energy, effort, focus, and perhaps acting in fearlessness, even though there is fear, like moving forward anyways, when I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work out and haven't been in this territory before to say, here I am as a coach, here I am as a person who's building a business from nothing. Cause I always worked in a company, there was a path kind of laid out. And even maybe in my, you know, personal life, there were like expectations that I was like, okay, I see that's the thing to do. So I'm going to go that way. And then somewhere in my 40s, I was like, I get to define how I want to live this life, how I want to feel, how I want to define um, who I present myself to be. And that was very empowering, but also brand new territory. And I think the value of that was now I feel like I can walk clients through that process for themselves if that's what they want to do at that point in our work together. So I think evolving who I show up as was probably some of the toughest. Um, I maybe they're growing pains. Maybe that's a way to call it. Growth is often uncomfortable because by its very nature you haven't been there before. So um being someone who's like not just um a person in this corporate job or showing up as this wife or this mom the way that seems maybe like traditional. I've broke free from some traditional expectations to be where I am right now. I just turned 50 this year and it's exciting
Mm.
because I'm like, okay, if I'm given the gift of 50 more years, I do not want to waste it. I want it to be fruitful, not just for me, in terms of having an abundant life, but also in how am I leaving this planet when I'm not here? Like, what's the legacy that my life can leave? So I've had that sort of perspective on, okay, if 50 is the mid mark, I've had this like thing in the back of my mind of like, I want to live to be 100. Like I've had this sort of inner goal for a long time. Obviously I don't control it 100%, but I've
Yeah.
had this like desire of like, what if I live to be 100? And I've always like listened to interviews of centenarians and their wisdom. I just find it really fascinating. And so, okay, maybe I have 50 years here. How am I going to contribute while I'm here? So that's a big part of my drive and my visioning for myself.
That's so beautiful. It's like, what can you leave that other people, what can you leave behind for other people that they can learn from you? Where you looking at where you are today, what is something you wish you knew when you were getting started?
Mm. Let's see. If I knew more, even like in my teens and 20s, like starting in this career path, if I knew more how significant it is to lean on others and connect with others and build a community. It can be really small, it doesn't have to be like something massive, but something meaningful where you have a core group who you are leaning on, but also giving to. I feel like that, if I had known that earlier, my path could have been less um, difficult, perhaps. I mean, this is just me thinking back because I had this fierce self reliance built into me, perhaps from, I don't know, family values or where I grew up geographically or just family, maybe a generational thing. But there was this fierce self reliance. And yes, it helped me through some things. But in the big picture, it held me back from some opportunities. So I would say for those people listening who maybe see themselves as very independent and self reliant and find themselves feeling like they're a person on an island to get through this, I would say the sooner you kind of break that deconstruct that thought process a bit and examine where is community, where can I build community, where can I join community, how can I be more vulnerable in that way. um, I think it adds a richness, and it also adds an acceleration to what you're put here to do, because we're not meant to do things in isolation. So
I love that piece of advice because that's also breaking a lot of limiting beliefs of we have to do it by ourselves. It's now that I'm thinking about it, like yes, it takes a village to create something great, but if you think about it, when you're a small baby, you're not doing anything on your own. Somebody is always helping you until you're stable and capable to walk on your own, to feed yourself and get dressed and so on. So it's so interesting, why do we get into our head when we get older that we need to do it by ourselves? Because we're human, we're meant to have that human connection. how did what were some like mindset shifts for you to start accepting help from others?
yeah. um, a main shift in mindset, that's a really thoughtful question. A main shift in mindset for me was, I my old thought pattern might have been, wait, I will look not very smart, or not capable enough, something, you know what I mean, that inner critic that's like, you're not blank enough. Perhaps my inner critic was like, wait, if you ask for help or lean on others or seek out others help and guidance, then you're going to look inadequate in some way,
Yeah.
so dismantling that, and part of it is like humbling yourself to say, wait, I don't know it all. And the bright side of accepting that is, I don't need to know it all. No, none of us know everything we need to know to thrive in this world, or in our job, or in our relationships. We all have areas that are blind spots or weaker than others. Just like we all have strengths that we naturally operate in. So I think the main mindset shift was letting go of that fixed belief that I didn't even know perhaps was controlling some parts of it, was to say, I don't need to know it all to be okay, or even to have people think I'm something enough. At the end of the day, I know that I'm complete, I'm whole, I'm creative as I am and always have been. Once I could give myself that acceptance, leading to the self love, that definitely was fuel for being able to say, hey, I'd love to collaborate with you on this, or hey, I'd love to, speak to you about your experience and find out, like, really, open myself up to those things. So that was definitely a growth journey for me.
Yeah, but that's so beautiful because exactly like you said, we think that we might come off as inadequate to do something. And I felt like that so many times when I was growing up. When it came to asking for help, like I never asked for help
Mm,
because I felt inadequate, and or I felt like I was going to get told my questions are stupid. But what I've learned is that no questions are stupid. The only bad questions are the ones that you don't ask. And if you can't ask for help, then you're not going to know. And that's kind of the same thing with going outside your comfort zone. If you don't step out of your comfort zone, you won't know. And if you don't ask for help, then you won't know. So I really love how you elaborated on that. It's beautiful.
thank you. Thank you. And the flip side of the mindset of, hey, if I ask, I will look dumb, that fixed mindset. The flip side of that is a mantra that's like, hey, I'm an indestructible learner. I can't be stopped
Hmm.
because I'm so curious and I'm always learning, you know, like those sorts of messages that you replace the disempowering messages with. You build those mental muscles to say, hi, I'm unstoppable because of my curiosity. I'm growth minded, therefore I can figure this challenging situation out. So it sounds very basic, but we also have to do it for it to help us. We have to have those moments where we speak to ourselves in that way.
Yeah. When you're working with women, what is the most common challenge or hurdle that you see them come across?
I would say almost universally is the idea that they believe that everything that's on their plate that they're responsible for, that they've taken on maybe in their work setting or in their business, even in their relationships, what they have is like they own it, and if for some reason it's not going well, it's because, let me think how to explain this. It's because they need to do more or do something differently, when the truth most of the time is it's about setting a boundary that's more clear, like a boundary that would protect energy levels, um, emotional energy, or even their physical well-being. So I think boundaries and realizing that how those could be enacted to help them um, feel better and do better. I feel like that's probably a universal conversation at some point with every person I work with.
Yeah, how to feel better and do better, because if you, and I think that always starts with how do you truly view yourself? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
so, it's so often like we get into our heads, especially growing up. Like this can start at such a young age when it comes to even healing those childhood wounds of being afraid to talk to somebody or being afraid to speak up because you got rejected at a young age. Like, for example, we've all been there where you thought somebody, you had a crush on somebody and you thought somebody was cute. And then you tell your friends and then they make fun of you. And then
Yeah.
immediately it's like that trauma, like, I don't want to say anything again, or you want to keep it to yourself. And I think that can be a really scary cycle to get into as well, because what we don't realize at that time, like it's all fun and games in the moment, but what it's really doing is creating that trauma and that resistance of not wanting to speak our mind and not wanting to be more vulnerable with people. So I think also vulnerability is a big one. Do you feel like
Yeah.
women struggle with being vulnerable with what they're struggling with?
I would say by the time I'm working with them in a coaching context, they are
Mm-hmm.
pretty much like, okay, I have things I want to have different in my life. I'm just not sure how to go about having this, how making the change and what it needs to be. So the vulnerability part, by the time they're in coaching, is usually um, not the obstacle, but it's more like getting really clear on what is mine if I'm the client, what's mine to own and what's not mine. And again, that's a boundary thing. For example, I had a client who was like, and this happens more often than not. First session, we're getting clear on what the problem is. People are like crying, they're like
Wow.
hurting. They don't even know me yet fully. I mean, they trust me enough to have me as their coach, but we don't have history. And they're in tears in our first session because they're like talking about these things that, like you said, they relate back to something that was maybe a childhood wound or an attachment style that goes back to our early developmental years, but it's playing out in the workplace. And these people, 20 years into their career, they're achieving in their roles, but on the inside, they're really like thinking, how can I sustain this? This is not bringing me the happiness that I thought this career would be. And it almost feels like golden handcuffs, right? Like I have this money coming in, I have this money coming in, or I have this path that I'm climbing, but I'm not enjoying it, or I no longer do things that make me feel like me and are fun anymore. So, or it's hurting their relationships or things because they're overworking, and then the relationships with people they care about are suffering. So all of these constellation of things, but it's not necessarily vulnerability. It's more saying, now that I'm here and I see with clear eyes what is the struggle, how do I speak up? Like you said, speak up and say, hey, maybe to my boss, say, you know what, the way that we work together isn't working for me. but here are some things that could work for me if we communicated this way, or can you please, let me know how I can support initiatives like that. Self advocacy in the professional roles is huge, like knowing how to speak up for themselves and having clarity first on what it is that they actually need. So again, it's boundaries that leads to an ability to self advocate. I see that a lot in the workplace. It might be influencing upward up the chain, but sometimes and oftentimes it's how do I influence in the day to day with my colleagues or my team that answers to me, um, and advocating for what is actually going to work well to get the desired result, or to have a desired environment that we all can function in. So I think it's like you said, understanding their value so that they can then say, wait, based on what I know to be true about me and my worth, here's a need I have, and here's the way to express it. So it's sort of like a series of understanding on the inside before they even take action on it. I don't know if that was clear.
No, it was. It was. It's under like what really stuck out to me was understanding your value. Because if you don't understand your value, then you're gonna have people walk all over you and you're not gonna understand what's happening. Whether it's in the career world, in your personal relationships, or just friends and family around you. If you don't understand your value, then they're going to walk all over you. And I think that's also a first sign of burnout is by just being a people pleaser and not having
Yeah,
those boundaries. Did you
definitely.
ever struggle with people pleasing when you were in the corporate world?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, the roots of being socialized in our culture, you're taught to play nice, right? Play
Mm,
nice, make other people feel good around you, right? Take care of others. So you're rewarded for all those behaviors, especially, being a woman. And definitely, everyone's family of origin has different amounts of value that they place on that. And I would say my family definitely had some roots of put others first, and that's
mm,
rewarded. You know, so definitely I would say I was probably in my late 20s when I'm like, I have this people pleasing thing and I don't like it, like I knew it. I knew it, I felt it, but I also didn't know how to fix it when I was
mm,
aware at first. Um, and I would say it was a process of understanding how to, in a healthy way, decide what is my responsibility based on who I want to be and the impact I want to make in this world, but then also what is not my responsibility and who around me um, needs to know in a really respectful way, but how do I change things? Like, how do you say no in a way that doesn't damage uh, the relationship permanently? Things like that were skills I navigated, learning to be assertive versus passive. I don't
mm.
feel like aggressive was a challenge I had, but some people have that, right? Like, how do I communicate less aggressively? I think for most women, it's like, how do I communicate more assertively and stop being passive just to keep peace, right? So you meet the people who are peacemakers, which I definitely would say that was a trait of my personality, to be a peacemaker. That's great until in some settings it's not, right? Where peace is not possible in that moment for the sake of a bigger goal. So those sorts of nuances I've worked through on my own. Always read a lot, always studied a lot, always learned from spiritual leaders, and had this hunger to really grasp a really loving way of living that is also very, I guess, genuine. So that's been a journey I've been on. And I think I bring that to my coaching as well.
That's so great. I always came across this issue. It's like whenever somebody would ask me to do something, I would say yes. And then if there came a point in time where I said no, people would always say, oh, why are you being so mean? I thought you
Mm,
were nice. Have you ever come across that with yourself or with your clients? And how do you go about creating boundaries there?
that's good. It's the distinction, I think, the distinction between being nice and being kind. So
Mm,
there's a difference, right? So
yeah.
you can be nice by choosing words that are considerate of the other person, but being kind might mean saying no
Yeah.
because, or giving difficult feedback, something that someone didn't want to hear, is actually being kind if you zoom out and look at the big picture, because if someone says, hey, how do you like this, I don't know, how do you like this project, what are your thoughts on it? If you're just nice and give only positive but don't give your honest feedback, are you really being kind? You know what I mean? Sometimes telling the truth and saying no, or saying, hey, this could be better, how about changing that? Giving the thing that might be tough in the moment to receive on the other person's side is actually the kind thing to do.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
great
how I see it.
advice.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's great advice. There really is a difference between nice and kind because nice gets you walked all over and kind gets you respected and people understand and respect your boundaries.
Yes.
So I love that. Wow, Ronnie, this has been so wonderful.
Thank you.
Before we wrap things up, I have one final question for you. What does it mean for you to be nourished inside out?
For me, it means slowing down enough to hear what is needed for me by my body, um, by my mind, like being very kind first to myself. Like you brought up the being nice, being kind, like being my own best friend. When I answered a question when I was in my coach certification, are you your own best friend? I
Oh,
literally had to
wow.
like pause and be like, I
Wow.
don't think I am. I don't think I'm my own best friend. And that was eye opening. I mean, I was like, 40 some years old. I thought I had some, wisdom in this world. And I'm like, whoa, that is a huge growth edge for me to explore. And I have very actively explored what is it to be my own best friend. And that's where the nourishing comes into play. If I have something that kind of brings me down, how do I react to it internally? What is the messaging I give myself? If I'm feeling low, reserves as far as energy goes, or health, or even my emotional state, if I'm like, wait, I'm feeling negative, I'm feeling impatient, that's a sign. Slow down. What is a need that maybe I've been ignoring today or this week or in this season? So slowing down and really, being my own best friend is what I think being nourished from the inside out means, because then I can show up and have impact and be creative and offer something of value, hopefully, over these years that I may be here. So, and getting to meet amazing people and pour into their lives as as they, you know, as they make it available through our coaching journeys and things like that.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And then lastly, where can people stay in touch with you and work with you?
Yeah, I have my website, RonniLandeck.com. That is where you can connect with me definitely and find out some of the offerings, because I have ways of helping people that really kind of match where you are in life. It could be one on one coaching, it could be the community that I founded. It's called Networking Naturally. So I love helping people connect and support each other in a really collaborative way. So I have this community where we learn from each other. So that's another way. And then also, I even have this year created learning, like a course that's asynchronous. It's called Unshakable. So it's how to be a leader that is, resilient and joyful and true to your own values. So I made a course that people could do on their own. And through that course, the modules of it, they still can meet with me at touch points to really unblock anything or discuss. So you're not on your own, even if you go that route. But you can find that all at ronnielandeck.com. That's probably the most central spot to find all those things.
Amazing. I'll have everything linked down in the show notes below so people can stay in touch. Thank you for joining us today, Ronnie.
It was so great to explore these questions. You really got my wheels turning. So thank you, Annetta. It was super fun, super fun. Thank you.